Nobody beats Talking Joe, an international podcast.
Brand new.
Hey, we're talking brand new Joe. Hey, we're on a brand new show. Deep dive, blow by blow. Spotting Uzis and crossbow. Like a buzzbow or pogo. Got ninjas like Don Shadow. Comics are how I spend my dough. We're coming to you in stereo. It's time for Talking Joe. With Mark and Tim, here we go.
Brand new.
Talking Joe is on the air.
Hey, it's me, Mark, and welcome to the G.I. Joe Comics podcast. It is Talking Joe. Today, we are talking G.I. Joe issue 5 from Skybound, released this week, just gone, Wednesday, March 19th, 2025. Now, I will not be talking about this issue on my own. I will be joined by my regular co-host. It's a real American Tim. It's Tim Finn.
Hello, Mark, and hello, listeners. And since we're live streaming this episode, hello, viewers. If you are listening to this episode later, good news. Mark has edited out all the ums, and the episode is 4% faster. Maybe the word is shorter.
It's more than that. If you are watching this live, you can certainly join in, like all of the cool kids, such as Shane Simic, friend of the show, Yo Talking Joe, and Wreckship85, who is joining us as a recent edition, first-time commenter. Welcome to the live stream, Wreckship.
Wreckship, we're rooting for you to also be a second-time commenter on this episode so that another comment can be about the issue or what we're saying and not just the acknowledgement of the comments. We're rooting for you.
And I think we've stolen Chris McLeod's audience because we've also got Rachel Salinas in the chat as well. Welcome aboard. There we go. So where should we start today? Let's start with some news. So we've had some more reprint covers from Jason Howard announced. I think it's this lovely thing that Jason Howard is doing second printings for literally every single copy of a comic released through the Energon universe. So it's that's fantastic.
I wonder, you know how certain variant cover themes have moved from one company to the next, like Negative Space, or in the case of G.I. Joe, it's called Camouflage. I wonder when some other publisher is going to either ask Jason Howard to do a pinup of a protagonist with a white background for a second printing of their comic, or get one of their perhaps lesser artists to do this, and it'll be like second print homage cover, and they won't mention Jason Howard's name, and we'll sort of know what's going on.
Indeed, that sounds cool. So on the screen at the moment, we've got 4 covers. It's G.I. Joe issue 3, second printing covers A and B, featuring Stalker and Chameleon. And then we've also got issue 4, second print, featuring Clutch and a Viper. So yeah, cool to see this trend continuing.
Two quick little things. 3 of these 4 covers, Stalker, Clutch, and the Viper, the camera is at knee height and is looking slightly up at these characters. So they're a little bit powerful and imposing. This is one of the ways that you draw Transformers, to emphasize that they're bigger than you. It's happening a little bit with Chameleon, but less so because she's jumping. Oh man, does she have a big swoosh of hair? I'm thrilled to see the straw, the tube of water for Stalker that you and I have spent so much time talking about. It makes an appearance here, and notably the Viper has a laser, a big laser rifle.
A laser. Okay, so that is G.I. Joe extra printings. Next up, let's take a bit of a tour around the Energon universe with a wrap-up of what else is going on. And it's Skybound with the Talking Joe guys. Everyone calm down, we're here to talk comics. Skybound.
You know, Mark, I've done Adele's Skyfall at karaoke. So every time you play that promo, the short version or the long version, it just takes me back. Also to that movie.
You're welcome to re-record with some less ropey, lyrics or not lyrics, vocals, if you like. I'm certainly it's not meant to be a forum for me to celebrate my own magical voice, because I know I'm not quite there with Adele, but so Tim, I don't know about you. Are you I think you're certainly reading G.I. Joe as it comes out, pretty much day of, if not before, because I force you to. But what about the rest of the Energon universe? What is your appetite like for having to be completely up to date and current with Void Rivals and Transformers?
Yes, I read both. If not the day they're out, then a day or two later. But that might also have to do with Tuesday night I'm at the store when the new stuff, we're putting it out for when we open on Wednesday. And then, if it's like 10 p.m. when I get home on Tuesday and I have a late dinner, I may not actually read comics because I'm not in the headspace. And then, there's stuff to do on Wednesday, but certainly within 3 days. And I like both these titles a lot. Void Rivals is a lot of fun. It reminds me of Firepower, also written by Kirk, in that it is a exciting and fast-paced Skybound series with really great art and color, and it just sort of skips along. And then Transformers is a little bit of a harder read because so many characters get hurt and there's so much destruction. The scale of not just the characters who've shown up, but a few who have died or been gravely injured, and small spoiler, there's now at least a combiner, 5 or 6 Transformers who become one big one. And they're doing significant damage to a major American city. And as we're now several issues into this sort of fight scene, I keep thinking, when's G.I. Joe going to show up? Where in the timeline does this fall such that, Duke will say, we have to go to Seattle. Some of these robots are there doing their thing.
Yeah, well, I think we're going to talk about that in just a second. So up on the screen, I've put the covers from the latest issue of Void Rivals, issue 17, which came out March the 12th. So we are seeing within the pages of Void Rivals the ongoing story of Pythona as she continues her journey to find Cybertron. I think in this particular issue, we've got a variant cover from Nicholas Megia, who's with her doing like that, pointing her fingers up towards us, the audience.
I think she's lunging at us as if she's like a vampire. She's going to bite us with her teeth and her fingernails.
Yeah, she's not leaning in to give you a hug by any means. So Pythona's journey and her story is continuing, but this particular issue is very much sort of the main storyline thrust, focusing on the female character Celia as she is discovering the secrets of the sacred ring. So that is latest issue.
Let's call out the number for people who don't see the cover right now. The latest issue of Void Rivals is issue 17.
Mm-hmm. I don't think we talked about it last time, but there was also a Void Rivals 2-pack plus Jetfire toy announced. It was announced at the time of Toy Fair, but independently to it. So 2 little Void Rivals O-ring figures, partly recycling parts. So it's got they've got Zartan and Baroness's legs, but very cool to see them making new O-rings, and specifically O-rings tying into the Energon universe, Tim.
To confirm, this is 3 3/4 inch scale.
That's right, yes.
And I should know this as a Transformers fan, but is this a Jetfire toy that has been previously released?
Yes, I believe so. It was a previous Jetfire that I think might have a brand new head, but it is basically recycling a previous version of...
Which is not a criticism, because the production runs of Transformers and many toys these days are so much smaller than they were 20 years ago or when we were kids, so that oftentimes if you don't get the toy on pre-order or right as it comes out, it's not on shelves a month or two later. This 3-pack also comes with a new printing of Void Rivals issue number 1.
That's right. Yeah. I think with a new variant cover. Yeah.
And have you done a close-up comparison of these two humanoid characters' legs? Are you satisfied that for reusing previously existing parts, they match or are close enough to what the comics characters' pants and boots?
I've kind of made that assumption. They certainly, on the variant cover that was announced alongside this, that cover very much matched up. I'm not 100% sure, just comparing generally to the comic, quite how accurate it is, but I'm going to assume it's pretty accurate. Otherwise, they probably, because they've got a fair amount to choose from, so I'm pretty sure it's fairly close. Cool stuff. So that was Void Rivals. Now, the other thing I was going to share was the other corner of the universe. Transformers issue 18 is the latest issue of Transformers out, featuring the return of, spoilers, give you a few seconds if you're not yet read Transformers, featuring the return of Megatron. So, Tim, you were talking about potential appearances of G.I. Joe in Transformers, which makes me think that possibly there might have been a little Easter egg in issue 18 that you have not picked up on, because I've actually not seen this mentioned by anyone online yet.
There are some soldiers, some American military soldiers who, hey, now I see it. Look at that. So Jorge Corona has drawn this issue and most of the previous issues. So the scene where these fully geared up, I want to say army soldiers, along with 2 helicopters, attack one of the sort of places where some Transformers are during this Battle of Seattle. Ultra Magnus is knocked unconscious, as is Carly, who is Spike's friend, girlfriend. And I'm now noticing that in a final panel on a page, we're looking at a close-up of a shoulder of one of these soldiers, and his arm patch has the star with 3-stripe logo of G.I. Joe. And none of these characters, they all have helmets and masks, so none of them are immediately, and they're all wearing the same sort of army uniform. None of them refers to anyone by a last name or a nickname. No one has a visible last name, name tag on their chest. So this is, yes, very good, Mark. That is a actual Easter egg. And if you're following the Transformers story, now we're worried about Ultra Magnus because he has been captured by the humans. And also, so has Carly, and maybe she's hurt. Oh, no, one of the soldiers says, no, she's not hurt. She's just knocked out. So that's Transformers. That's Transformers 18. Very good, Mark.
I was just thinking there's an alternate possibility that maybe it's not a G.I. Joe kind of trooper there or affiliated. Maybe they've just got one of these from their Kickstarter extras. They ordered the compendium and they've just added on the G.I. Joe stripe onto their jacket. Maybe not.
This does ask the question.
They're not Sector 6. They're not to Sector 7, Greg. I think that's a distinctive logo.
For fans that don't know that reference, that's from the Michael Bay live action Transformers movies. Is that the sort of government agency conspiracy that was tracking the Transformers?
Yeah, that's the government agency that could definitely have been G.I. Joe if they just thought a little bit harder about it. But,
so this does ask the question of, where does this issue take place in the timeline compared to the 25 G.I. Joe comics that have been published so far? And also, who is this individual and who are the other individuals? Are there, at some point in the G.I. Joe timeline that maybe we haven't seen yet, G.I. Joe team members who all wear the same costume, green shirts, generic Joes, although that term doesn't quite do this justice, how capable and cool looking these guys are, because it's definitely not a team of 9 people who all show up with different shirts and pants and weapons and hairstyles.
Maybe this is Wolf Spider, and we've just not been introduced to him properly yet. Yeah, I mean, it feels like the Transformers timeline is relatively smushed together. It's quite, just seems to be just lots of things happening at a pace over a number of issues, rather than it being a dragged out piece of time. And we've sort of got the touch point with G.I. Joe issue 1 in terms of the MacGuffin for issue 1 was a slice of Cybertron falling from the sky into the ocean, wasn't it? And that was as a result of the events of Transformers. I can't remember the issue off the top of my head, but was it, I don't know, 10, something like that?
Yeah.
And so you'd think that it would be sort of running parallel-ish to G.I. Joe in terms of time. We've got a Transformers trivia question for you, Tim, from Rachel. Has a member of a combiner ever been killed off? That's an interesting question, because, combiners combine. What if you're missing one?
The answer is yes. This happened about 10 years into IDW's run. I think it's in Mairead Scott's Till All Are One, which was the 3rd monthly that was running after More Than Meets the Eye and Robots in Disguise had been running. Oh, maybe it's in John Barber's Robots in Disguise around like 2014. But is it one of the Combaticons? I think one of the Combaticons is killed, and Prowl is sort of forcibly turned into the missing component, and they merge into Bruticus, and Prowl's a part of it, and he's very upset. Or this is maybe this is Constructicons, but the sort of chest, shoulders, and head is Prowl, and he's very upset. And one of the amazing things that whole continuity did at IDW was explore many facets of Transformers. And I'm not going to say any more, because I don't want to spend the next 6 minutes of this episode talking about how great IDW's Transformers comics were. But if you are a Transformers fan, many, many amazing stories told at IDW between, what was it, roughly 2005 and 2018. Okay, back to G.I. Joe. One last thing. In 2 previous issues of Transformers, Starscream is half Starscream from the waist up and a Cobra Hiss tank from the waist down.
I
and
forgot to talk
technically he still is in this month's issue 18, but he doesn't really drive around as much as he flies around on Astro Train in space shuttle mode. And so you don't really see Starscream as half of a G.I. Joe vehicle in this issue, although technically he still is. But he has not been surgically severed from it. He has not been given his legs back, but he's also not been saying, hey, look at me, I can drive.
Yeah, he's still half hiss, half plane, I guess, or robot, whatever you call them. And just to give a shout out and a big thanks, Infinite Entertainment with a super chat. Hello, lads. I can't catch the show live, but I was able to finish the Marvel run. It's easily one of the greatest runs of all time. Correct. Unrelated question. There's a ninja-sized hole in the EU. How would you introduce Snake Eyes?
That's a big question.
Interesting question. Let's
I'm gonna let my brain
return to it at the end, maybe.
Yes, I'm gonna let my brain work on that on the back burner, because if I have to come up with an idea right now, it won't be very good. And while I'm talking, Mark will come up with a better idea.
Well, so continuing the thing about Energon Universe, next up in Energon Universe, April 9th is Transformers 19, continuing that story with Megatron's return. Void Rivals is April the 30th. And there's also a little title called G.I. Joe, which finishes up its first arc with issue 6 on sale 16th of April. More on that in a bit.
Don't forget on Saturday, May 3rd, Free Comic Book Day, with an Energon Universe Free Comic Book Day comic with a G.I. Joe on the cover.
Yep. With a clutch, isn't it? And I think it sort of suggests that possibly...
Mark, what's a clutch?
I get that reference.
Hmm.
Very good. Where are we next? We are talking about creative team for this issue. It's the normal bunch. It is writer Joshua Williamson, artist Tom Reilly, colorist Jordie Bellaire, and letterer Russ Wooton. Editor is Ben Abernethy, publication design Andres Juarez, and production is Ashby Florence.
Let's have a look at the covers in the gallery.
Cover A is drawn and colored by Tom Reilly. It's monochromatic. There is no background. There's the hint of a background. There may be a little bit of wall or hallway around behind Destro, but we're seeing Destro taking up 4/5 of the cover. The top is open for the logo. The background is just about all black. Destro's got a lot of black on his face where he's metallic. Of course, his tunic or his battle uniform shirt is mostly black. And he's holding a little Star Wars handheld hologram communicator that is showing the 5 Joes who are prisoner in this issue, all with their arms bound behind them, down on their knees in a circle. And
it's not an intricately carved watermelon sculpture then.
No.
Definitely the Star Wars thing.
Because it is casting light. So all of Destro, where his hands, his gauntlets, his head, his collar would be metallic silver, his chest, which would be Caucasian. Everything is red or a version of red, sort of a light red. I hesitate to say pink because pink is a little different than light red, but maybe not. So anyway, if you squint, this cover is just black and red with a little bit of light red, and then just a tiny bit of white here and there with some metallic highlights, and then Destro's green eyes. He is smirking and looking down, and he's underlit by this Star Wars handheld communicator or transmitter. The logo is in that light red, that pink, and Rachel Salinas says, not watermelon, it's an ice sculpture, as long as it's not a butter sculpture. There's a mean joke for Talking Joe fans. From way back.
That's a deep cut.
This is both a story cover, because this is a story moment from this, not literally this issue, but roughly within this issue, where Destro is surveying the prisoners. But it also acts like just a cool, pin-up cover where, Batman is just on a rooftop kneeling on a gargoyle looking cool with the night sky behind him, right? And in this case, Destro's just standing there being powerful and intimidating.
Yeah, it does sort of echo, as you say, this point in the interior of the book where he is kind of arms crossed looking down at the prisoners bound. But yeah, very, very different kind of actual story beat. He doesn't have the hologram or anything else. He hasn't just opened a Pokemon case to reveal that some miniature Joes rather than a Charizard, as Greg thinks might have happened.
If that's a Pokemon reference, I barely understand. But
the thing about Pokemon references, Tim, is you've got to catch them
all. Cover B is Mark made a reference a minute ago that this issue's creative team is standard. There is a small change here because cover B is penciled by David Finch, but not inked by him, as he has been inking his covers up until this one. This issue 5B cover is inked by Sandra Hope, who is a long-time David Finch and Wildstorm inker, who inked a lot of Wildcats and Gen 13 and some other titles, and maybe was also at Top Cow, which is where David Finch first surfaced. So on this cover, there's a red, orange, brown background, sort of sky color. There's some stone wall brick debris on the top right and bottom left. But most of the cover, 2/3 of the cover, is the Baroness lunging and punching with her left hand. Destro, who's in the bottom right of the corner, having been punched. There are 2 big metallic highlights glinting on the top of his head, and the punch is so hard that he's spitting blood. So this is an action cover. Destro sort of crumpling in it. The logo is a mustard yellow, and I don't know how to describe the very subtle difference between David Finch inking himself and Sandra Hope inking him, because David Finch's pencils are quite tight, and so I expect several inkers inking David Finch, the results would end up looking quite similar to each other. When I first looked at this cover, I was looking at sort of some of the detail on the sort of wrist brace that the gauntlet that Baroness has on the top left of the cover, and just some of the lines on Destro's face. And I thought, sort of abstractly, this looks a little different for Finch. And so I think I was vaguely noting that perhaps this cover was drawn a little differently, or in this case, by a different person. And Rachel Salinas says, and then Baroness goes to the ER to care for her broken hand.
Funny enough, you're talking about sort of Sandra Hope being the addition to the team. She actually posted to YouTube a very thoughtful video sort of talking about her inking process for this particular cover, and talking about what, and you know, some of the the thought process around how you would go about inking, you know, this particular piece and more generally, and the kind of extra kind of touches that she's considering as she's sort of going through that, and talking about, you know, the textures of, you know, some of the rubble, for example, and how she'll sort of just be, you know, considering some of the detail of like the Baroness's hair, and you know, how she might sort of just not necessarily completely just trace over the pencil, but how to just sort of just augment and finish that as well.
Yeah, so this YouTube video is called Turning 2D Art into 3D, Inking with Drama. If you listeners want to search for that. I think about inking sometimes because if someone with a pencil draws a curved line, like part of a circle, and they hand it to you and they say, ink this. If you draw precisely on that line with a pen, with a different pen, with a brush, you will get 3 different looks. If you are being just a little loose and you draw slightly outside the line, if you draw slightly inside the line, if you decide to make the beginning of your line a little thicker and then go thin, or vice versa, you suddenly have 7 different variations of that one line, which I've just described as like a quarter of a circle. And now you imagine a drawing filled with detail. Some of the detail may be very tight. Some of it may be a little loose. Some of it may be very loose. And you get the fun of collaborating between pencilers and inkers, and having inkers who enhance or sort of just change pencil art. Cover C is Ryan Sook. This is the Baroness. She is cleaning a weapon in an indoor shooting range, a G.I. Joe shooting range, because each of the what do you call it? Sort of the barriers between spaces where you fire and the next person fires has that star and 3 stripe logo on it. In the distant background, there are some paper targets with, you know, silhouettes of head and shoulders with white concentric circles on them. In the ceiling, there's a whole grid of fluorescent lights. Baroness is looking tough and in shape, wearing just a tank top, but she's definitely been going to the gym because she has a lot of definition and a little bit of mass to her muscles. This is not a like skinny J. Scott Campbell waist narrower than her neck babe. And then in the immediate foreground, all the way down on the cover, are some like fluids and little bottles and bits that you would use to clean a gun. Baroness is looking down as she does this. She's not looking at us. She is wearing a version of her glasses, I guess, sort of standard eye protection. Mark, this just occurred to me. What was the variant cover at IDW around issue, was it 280? I think it was a 1 in 10 variant, which had Scarlet and Snake Eyes at a shooting range, and she's saying something to him because she's about to use, or she's just used her crossbow, and it's a punchline like, now it's my turn, or something. And I want to say this was drawn by, was it Andrew Griffith?
It was the person that did the Dawn and Helix special. So there we go. This is from Casey Maloney. It's that, weapons range piece. On the printed version, it says, okay, my turn. He still needs a nose. As in, she's going to be shooting her arrow down the range to plonk it in the middle of Cobra Commander's face to give him a nose.
Having already put 2 throwing stars in his eyes, or following on from Snake Eyes, who has put through 2 throwing stars in his eyes. And just to be accurate, this is issue 281, and this was a variant cover. Thank you for finding that, Mark.
Oh, Shane said it looked like Ryan Sook has been to a range before, very accurate looking, or at least doing his, due diligence and research. Cover
D is drawn and colored by Carl Kerschel, whose work I love. I am a little upset that Gotham Academy was not a bigger hit for DC, although I was happy that there was a big soft cover with all 3 story arcs. Also, there was that Lumberjanes crossover. Carl Kerschel's art is really appealing. This cover sort of finally made it click for me, and I don't know why this didn't occur to me until now. But if you wanted to find an artist who was sort of the most like Tom Reilly, without finding an artist who was trying to ape Tom Reilly to draw issues of G.I. Joe after Tom Reilly, Carl Kerschel would certainly fall into that category. Now, Kerschel was drawing comics 10, 15 years before Reilly. He's done work for DC. So this cover is all the Joes in a battle scene. They're on the left and they're rushing to the right. Duke is punching a Cobra. Baroness is firing. 2 of the Joes are in the Vamp. And there's a lot of green to this cover between the vehicle. Even the sky, which is a light green, sort of background smoke, sort of feels like a mountain range, but I think it's just actually ground and smoke. And this cover will connect with a Carl Kerschel right half of the battle scene featuring all of Cobra next issue, next month, which then drops all the green and picks up a lot of blue and red. It's really nice color range here, and would make a fun poster if Skybound wanted to sell posters. Kerschel's work feels, I don't love this term because I think it means a lot of things to a lot of different people, but Kerschel's work is a little animated. There's a little bit of cartooniness of like traditional sort of animation cartooning, and also flat color styling in how he draws and colors his covers. He's also done some really nice covers for DC of Silver Age reprints for their giant hardcover omnibuses. And maybe he did the Batman Brave and the Bold one for the 80s, or the Swamp Thing one for the 80s. Anyway, Kerschel's work is really appealing and warm, and I would love to see him do some G.I. Joe interiors.
Mm-hmm. He's done a couple of other covers so far, and they were really strong ones. There was a Dreadnought one that he did for Cobra Commander, and I think he did a Major Blood,
Scarlet,
and probably a Scarlet one.
Yeah, it's funny. Like Scarlet 2A and 3B are almost the same cover, like Scarlet and Storm Shadow and a white background, and I keep getting them mixed up. Okay, back to Carl Kerschel's wonderful cover for issue 5D. I just want to say this was the 1 in 10 variant. Variant. Okay, cover E, drawn by Travis Moore and colored by Adriano Lucas, is the 1 in 25 ratio variant. This is what are they called? Valkyries?
Yep, the Valkyries. Okay. Yep.
I keep wanting to say Vipera because that's the first lady Cobra troop builder back from what was that, 1999. So this is a female Cobra soldier in blue. She has a pistol and a machine gun. She's stepping toward us, but looking past us and firing. And there's an explosion behind her, which is in the style of the 1980s Hector Garrido toy package art.
Mm-hmm. And it's from Travis Moore, who is doing. He seems to be the go-to guy for this explosion background at the moment. This is he's got he's had quite a few under his belt by this point, and a few more to come. the Valkyries do look awesome, and it was very nice to see them featured in, was it issue 2? I wondered to myself about them. That was like kind of an issue, a grand appearance, and then there's an explosion, and we've not really seen them since. I sort of wonder, given the massive cast of G.I. Joe, all of the new characters introduced via Classified and the new designs released via Classified, I wonder if it will sort of get some of that same cadence from this issue, from this series of sort of characters potentially, just having to introduce them, show them once, and maybe not have them appear again, or potentially for a very long time, just because there's such a huge cast. And yeah, Valkyries is one of my examples for that at the moment.
Since I made a reference to our one of my criticisms of some Devils Do issues of G.I. Joe from the early 2000s, one of those other criticisms was that sometimes some of the artists would draw stiff characters who were just standing straight up and down, and there was no dynamism to their pose. And this is a really nice example of contrapposto, where this Valkyrie has her weight on one foot, and if you look at her hips, her waist is not a straight horizontal line. It's not from 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock. It's from 8 o'clock to 2 o'clock. And then in opposition of that, if you look at her shoulders are a diagonal going up the other way. And what that's representing is that she's twisting her spine. So her left shoulder, the shoulder on the right, is further back because she's twisting her torso one way and her head is looking the other way. So there are all these diagonals this way, that way, and twists this way, that way to create opposition and dynamism in this very simple seeming pose, soldier standing there or taking a step, firing a weapon. And yet there's a lot happening anatomically. And when characters are just standing around talking, or worse, standing around during a battle scene, this is oftentimes sort of the minimum that I'm hoping for, get them to do something, even if it's just a little something.
Yeah, it's interesting. We've got 2 covers here in this run where we've got, it's a solo cover featuring a female, and on neither of them do you get that sort of, good girl, TNA kind of sexy pose. They're sort of being presented, as kind of capable antagonist type characters here, or I guess protagonist in the case of Baroness, actually. And I've sort of often kind of raised cheeky objections to the overuse of Baroness on the covers, but that particular one that we were looking at earlier, I didn't get that same feeling from, because it felt like this is presenting her as an interesting character. It's doing something different with it, and it's not just a standard in the outfit sort of posing. Essentially, it's much more interesting than that. Yeah,
the Valkyrie here, considering what she's doing with her hips here, that's just part of taking a step. That's not a model pose, like, look at me, I'm sexy. Look at this bathing suit, or look at this skirt. I do feel like between subtly on regular covers and more overtly on variant covers, there has been much less and maybe none of that at Skybound, and that's neat, because these characters can be sexy, both the men and the women, and they can be alluring and attractive, but I don't really want that to be primary, because they're soldiers and they're adventurers. If there's a little scene where someone's on a date, if Destro starts to woo the Baroness. Okay, cover F is the 1:50 ratio variant. This is drawn by E.J. Su, who has been doing this series for this series, and drew some great Transformers comics early and middle, and a little bit later at IDW, and is very much a technical artist. So here's the Vamp drawn at an isometric angle, colored in, superimposed over its blueprint in the style of the original toys. The blueprints are inverted, so it's white lines on blue, and we see the Vamp in the blueprints of the background from above, front, and side. And then there's some rectangles on the bottom right, where if this was a blueprint or a toy design internally at Hasbro, there would be space for part number, part name, illustrator's name. And EJ Sue's signature is down there, though all the other rectangles are blank. Fun cover. Because, as I've said previously, it makes primary the vehicle, which is half of G.I. Joe. Half of G.I. Joe is the vehicles, even if we often start with the characters, what they're doing, and even if you sort of look over these 5 issues so far, and it feels like the vehicles are not fully half of it.
Okay, and this issue we have only got one retailer exclusive cover. This is another one from Tyler Kirkham, who's been a regular retailer variant favourite. This is a Cobra Commander from 616 Comics, and he is calling this a war-torn theme. So he's splitting Cobra Commander down the middle in his Energon universe look with that sort of red flourish from that sort of Napoleonic era type sort of tunic that he's wearing. So one half is all nice and new, a shiny chrome plating on his mask, and on the right hand side it is post-war with battle damage, particularly on that helmet and the split faceplate. We can see an eye sort of peeking out from behind it. There's a blue sky on the left and a smoke filled red sky on the right.
Mark, what's that sword, dagger, Nemesis Enforcer's arm spike on the top right?
I think that's the sword. On his design, he's got a sword, I think, sort of dangling from his waist. And actually, I think we see that on the cover to issue 6. So Cobra Commander, one of Cobra Commander's weapons of choice seems to be this sword.
Wait, Matthew Matson said that's a great retailer exclusive cover. All right, so we've got a vote for Tyler Kirkham. All right, Mark, what's this deal?
We had Sam Myers with a super chat. Hello, gentlemen. For my fellow grammar guardsman, Professor Flynn, did you see the error in Joe issue 2? Cobra Commander shouts for cavalry, not cavalry. Calvary, not Calvary. Calvary, not cavalry. I think we missed that one. I don't remember us picking up on that one.
We did miss that, but I will be retroactively outraged, and I will thank you, S. Myers, for pointing this out. I will consider responding to my email of a month ago to Skybound about several typos recently in Real American Hero and Energon Universe G.I. Joe comics, and I will add this one and request that it gets fixed for digital editions and the graphic novel.
So I think the next thing we do here is a plot breakdown.
Plot breakdown.
The G.I. Joe team is being held captive at the Mars headquarters in Washington, D.C. Duke meets Destro again, the first time since being left for dead in the pages of Duke issue 5. Duke receives a beating from Mercer, but has an ace up his sleeve. It is Clutch who is in control of a Hiss tank and able to blast at the Cobras, allowing the Joes to break for cover. Scrap Iron's portable missile launcher takes out the Hiss tank. The Joes face the Cobras with just their fists, but somehow prevail, and they make an escape in a Cobra helicopter. Elsewhere in the building, Cobra Commander and Dr. Monev are with the brainwave scanner. Dr. Venom explains that the brainwave bomb will make anyone within 5 miles of the blast when it goes off, loyal to Cobra. But within 1 mile, the blast will completely erase minds. This is a sacrifice that Cobra Commander is happy to make. But first, they need a test subject. Cobra Commander pushes Venom in the machine and turns it on. Ready to transport the bomb, Cobra Commander finds himself face to face with Duke, promising an epic confrontation for the final issue of this arc next time round. Tim.
Hey, Mark, Monev is Venom backwards.
Oh, yeah.
Readers, if readers, if you figured this out long before we did. Wait, Mark, remind me. That name does not originate in the Energon universe. It had shown up before that.
I have to cast my mind back, but I think it originated from the toy when that was introduced from the club.
For the club. Okay. So everyone, if you knew that back in 2014, whenever that toy was released, or a month or two ago when the character was first mentioned in the Energon universe, and Mark and I are just joining you in the Smart Persons Club. Excellent. Congratulations. For myself, I'm going to feel good that I came up with that on my own, and that Mark didn't tell me like 3 months from now when the soft cover's out. Like, Tim, did you realize? Are you about to ask me what my overall reaction to this issue was, Mark?
Yes. What was your
fight? I was really struck by how much action this issue had, and particularly pages 12 and 13, where Tom Reilly, artist Tom Reilly, is breaking these pages into 11 panels into a 12-panel grid, so that we're really zooming in on moment by moment of bad guys firing, Joe gets in, Joe hits, or Joe gets in, Joe hits and grabs a weapon, Joe uses the weapon. With each panel, you all know I like sound effects, and now I will read them. Now I will perform them all. Bang, bang. Spit, spit, crack, slash, thunk, stab. Whoosh, pow. Next page. Beep, thump, tick, kick, boom, crack. Huff, huff, huff. That's in a word balloon. And it's not just those 2 pages, that this issue is very much about action, and yet also I had forgotten, and this is why I don't write comics, who knew who, and who hadn't seen who since when, and Williamson is keeping track of that. So as you said in your plot breakdown, right, Destro hasn't seen Duke since, anyway, whatever that was, but between previous issues of G.I. Joe and the various miniseries.
Yeah, I think it was issue 5 of Duke when, if you remember, what happened in that issue was that Duke had been battling a bat. He was sort of left, quite bruised and bloody on the floor, and then they set off an explosion, blew up the base. Destro and Mercer and Scrapper escaped. They thought that they had left Duke, dead, died in the explosion, and I believe then there was also a news story that revealed that Duke had died in the explosion. So to the world, pretending that Duke had died. So an interesting callback that Destro is saying, I thought you were dead. Hold on, because he hasn't seen him since.
Not just that Williamson is writing a fight action issue, or Reilly is drawing it, but a specific word, visceral. This is close quarters, hand to hand. There's punching and kicking. So that wrestling match that we got between Duke and Risk, was it 2 issues ago? That's now been expanded, and it's now the Joes versus the Cobras. And then the laser tinged icing on that cake is this fight is sort of bookended by a bunch of energon weapons being used and people being zapped and vaporized, zapped to death. Rachel Salinas says, Cobra accuracy was great against rock and roll, not so much here. Yeah, that's a reasonable criticism, that considering how close all the Cobras are in this big sort of warehouse space at the Mars building in DC, during these 2 or 3 pages of fighting, the Joes get nicked, and Mercer gets nicked, although by Clutch. But none of the Joes die. I don't have a big appetite to see any Joes get majorly injured here. And also, there is a word balloon. There is a moment in the script where Williamson, I think, is trying to allow for the sort of realistic solution that none of the Joes get shot up here, which is when Duke says, we just have to Oh, the Baroness.
Shall I tee it up? They're pinned down after being rescued by Clutch.
Yes.
They say we're pinned down. This stalker, we're pinned down. The door is the only exit. There's got to be another way. But how? We don't have any weapons. We still have our hands, says Risk, who, as we know, is very capable cage fighter, etc. And Duke says, finally, we agree on something, Risk. Cobras are all, lined up, weapons bearing down on where the Dukes are, where the Joes are. Shoot to kill, and we just need to make it across the room. Our best chance is to take the weapons off the Cobras as soon as we engage the first wave. That's a suicide mission. And then it's this. They go for it. They sort of run at the Cobras with a stouty, hardy "Yo Joe" as they go along. What do you think of this moment? The Joes unarmed against the Cobras, weapons drawn.
I like it. I don't think it's realistic, even with that bit of scripting on the previous page, to account for, we just have to make it 6 feet, knock out the first wave of people, and grab their weapons. I think you'd need one more thing for this to really work. But objection denied. I'll allow it, says Your Honor, because I do want the Joes to win. And specifically, I don't want them to get shot up with bullets and deadly lasers. I did want to ask you, Mark, about this first panel of page 12, where the Joes are all lunging in sort of an anime, like Street Fighter video game inspired. They're all in a lunging pose, and then there's this scrolling speed lines background. They're all aiming from left to right, and Duke yells, "Yo, Joe!" And I wanted to get your take on that because I think this is the first appearance of that battle cry in the Energon universe. We have been noting first appearances in this new continuity.
Let's also call out, it's not something from the comic book. That it's not something that Harmer would use. It's very much a cartoon callback.
Yeah, I think Harmer has used it once or twice, and of course, there's also a beverage. But yes, this is Williamson doing his version of the animated series, as he has said and as we have said. But I wanted to ask, do you think it's earned? Because, you and I have an audience, and one of us might, in the moment, invent a Talking Joe or Mark and Tim refrain or slogan. But if you and I had to run 15 feet and maybe die, I don't know that we would think of, let's talk some Joes, or me singing the Nobody Beats Talking Joe, an international podcast at the end. I don't know that I would do that if I might be about to die. And I like it because it's fun, but this does feel like one of those moments which sometimes happens in movies and TV shows and comics where the characters for a moment are sort of reacting to the audience that's consuming the story and not the reality where, the example I sometimes use is in Star Trek First Contact, when Worf and 2 others are outside the Enterprise in spacesuits about to fight a Borg, and Worf has his Batlev, his Klingon curved weapon, and he says to the Borg, "Assimilate this," which is as if the Borg had a slogan, resistance is futile, we will assimilate you. And now in this hot damn, take that, I'm a badass, the audience is gonna love this moment, Worf sort of uses it back on them. And at the moment when I saw that movie, I thought, yeah. And then my buddy said, "That's dumb." And I thought, huh. So I'm not saying this is dumb. Nothing about the Energon universe G.I. Joe is dumb. But I did wonder if this battle cry isn't fully earned.
Yeah, I mean, where does it come from? I guess to some degree, you're right. Would you really say that the reason that it resonates is because there was a cartoon, and in that cartoon they said "Yo Joe" is their catchphrase. A cartoon
that we've seen, but
we've
Duke
seen as the audience, so
it's hasn't seen, and
yeah.
No one said it to him. Hawk didn't say it in his office.
So yeah, it's a little bit cheesy, but I think in the context of the moment, it kind of works. Oh, we've got some interesting comments here in the chat. So Shane says that he likes it. It's on the heels of everyone putting in their hands and agreeing for rock and roll.
Okay.
I think Greg says hands in was a kind of Saturday morning cheesy, but there we go. And Justin says that he thinks that Yo-Jo appeared before this. The Baroness said it when she first put on her Joe uniform for the first time in the Free Comic Book Day special.
Very good, Justin.
That
Taylor.
does run
Thank
true.
you.
So good call out. So maybe there we go. With that context of paying attention, it's like first time maybe Baroness is saying it slightly sarcastically. She's got her new uniform. She's like, Yo-Jo, I guess. And here we go. It's now, they're a team, and it's a bit more earnest. It's a bit more earned, pulling together. They're all in it together. Hands in, Yo-Jo this time. Maybe
on my digital copy, I'll open it up in Photoshop and white out the 5 letters, and I'll change it to Avengers Assemble. Scotty Cameron says, I do like how Yo is in red and Joe is in blue. That's a nice lettering touch from Russ Wooton. And also Joe is bigger. And also the letters are not on a straight line. Like the J is a little higher than the E. Is a little lower. So they're a little, I think the technical word is jangly. While we're talking about zoomed in aspects of the art or lettering, I wanted to call out something that Tom Reilly does a few times in this issue, on this very page and the next page, and also the previous page, that I really like. It first happens on the previous page, so that's page 11 in panel 1 and in panel 3. Page 11, panel 1, that's the one that Mark read, the dialogue where the Joes are starting to figure out what they're going to do. They're going to rush them. So in the foreground on the right side, there's some Joes behind this blown up hiss tank, and they're all knocked out in sort of a dark beige. And then on the left side of the panel, Destro, Mercer, and some Cobras are coming in from a doorway, and they're all sort of knocked out in orange. And Reilly, you maybe can't even see it if you are watching the visual on this live stream, but Reilly applies a white zipatone, a white mechanical tone, a screen of uniform dots over that left third of the panel, so that all the blacks in that panel, in effect, become sort of a gray. And then he does it again 2 panels later when Destro says, shoot to kill. And then when you turn the page, and it's this 2-page spread of these 11 and 12 small panels of punching and kicking and stabbing with all the sound effects, every third panel is monochrome, right? Where Jordie Bellaire colors it in a washed out light orange. Underneath, Reilly knocking back all this black ink with these white dots. And this is something that comics artists tend not to do anymore because that stuff's hard to find and it's expensive. And also some artists are drawing digitally. And so either you don't think of it because you're drawing on a piece of glass, or you're not trained with all the traditional tools. Reilly is trained with all the traditional tools and thinks traditionally, and is drawing traditionally. And it's just a small thing, and I really like it in this ongoing sort of visual dynamic of this comic, where Reilly draws very modern comics, but that owes a lot to old comics, and Jordie Bellaire colors these comics in a very limited but purposeful way.
Indeed, and I think we've been sort of skirting around the edges of it a little bit, but sort of it's very much a case where the Joes are definitely, they're sort of really suffering from it. They're beat up. Duke in particular, I mentioned that he was beaten up by a bat and left for dead in the pages of Duke issue 5, and here once again he's sort of really going through the ringers. He's on the floor, he's beaten up and a little bit delirious perhaps. He's sort of laughing at one point. And on the screen I've shared a tweet from Tom Reilly where he says, G.I. Joe issue 5 is out today. This shot from the issue is pretty much how I felt when I was done drawing it. Hope you all enjoy the most action-packed issue yet. And it's true, it is definitely an action-packed issue. And there's Duke lying on the floor in a pool of blood, sort of laughing to himself.
His own blood.
His own blood.
Yeah, laughing to himself.
You made me bleed my own blood.
You made me bleed my own blood.
This is a good segue because one of my comments on my notes for this issue is that Duke is nuts. Duke is a little crazy. This is Joshua Williamson's Duke is different than Larry Hama's Duke, and different and a particular exaggeration of the animated Duke.
Taking the beats and sort of something, seeming to really embrace that, and sort of just taking, ironically, taking a lot of sort of seemingly risks, given the other characters, and sort of taking the hits and getting up again. And I've been watching with Thomas at the moment. I've been watching the Invincible cartoon, and sort of just seeing the Joes all beaten up in this issue particularly was sort of very much reminding me of kind of Invincible, where it seems like almost every episode, he's taking the hits, left with a bruised eye and bloody and battered face. And we looked at Doug Monkey's cover the other time. This is one of the reprint covers for issue 1 that was solicited last month. And this has got a variant cover of Duke, all bloody and battered in that kind of Invincible style.
I'm just going to make a distracting non sequitur. If you could go back to that Doug Mankey image.
Oh, right. Okay.
If you squint and you didn't know what it was, you might think it's Lieutenant Stone from G.I. Joe Extreme with all the tears and battle damage. Okay. The Duke in this, so Rachel Salinas says Duke seems to have a death wish. So the Duke in this continuity, this is the guy who jumps out of a building onto a helicopter to commandeer it. I would be worried if I jumped out of a building at a helicopter that I would die. Either I would fall because I'd miss the helicopter, or the helicopter would move and I would get chopped up by the rotor blade, or let's say I make it to the cockpit and then the other guy punches me and I fall. And who says it's a suicide mission? Stalker
says
on
yeah,
page
Stalker's a bit more level-headed, I think, out of the characters, isn't he?
Panel 4 of page 11, Stalker says that's a suicide mission. And not only is Duke taking these big risks, but he's not doing it foolishly. He is taking risks, but they're paying off. And he's getting beaten up, and this has happened several times in his miniseries and in this series. And Greg Augustin reminds us that Duke is a man of action, after all.
As spelled out to us in the pages of Duke issue 1, probably page 1.
Yes, page 1 or 2. You're a man of action, says the narrator. Scotty Cameron says Doug Mankey's Duke cover sort of reminds me of Tony Moore's cover for the Brit Old Soldier one-shot, which just so happens to be a Skybound comic. There's a moment where Duke takes his biggest risk of this entire issue, Mark, which I wanted to ask you about, with the reveal of this thing that he knows that Destro doesn't know and how it pays off. So that panel that you just showed that Tom Reilly tweeted, Duke has been beaten up and he's laughing to himself over the course of 3 panels. Ha, 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 ha. You find this humorous? Ha, ha, ha. You just gave yourself away, Chrome Dome. I know something you don't. And then, Mark, I wanted to ask you about this moment, this reveal, this page turn.
So it's Clutch, hit it. What is it? Hold on. Let me do this.
What is a clutch?
Mark's going to do the rest of the episode with that filter on.
Yeah, there we go.
Mark's going to do the rest of the episode doing his Sean Connery Destro voice.
What is a clutch?
So yes, and then we've got a sort of a page reveal and a shock at this, just as much as Destro has with the reveal of Clutch in this hiss tank and here to save the day. And I think I was almost as surprised as Destro was. I wasn't expecting kind of that reveal of Clutch to come in and save the day quite so quickly. Were you surprised by the reveal of Clutch here to save the day?
Not only was I surprised, a page later, Baroness says, "How did you know Clutch was there?" And Duke says, "I guessed." And Baroness says, "You guessed?" And that's when I thought, and this is before the little moment of a suicide mission, right? Let's run towards all the guys with machine guns and possibly lasers. And I thought, man, this guy is really reckless. Like, well, when you see an action hero in a movie and they do this kind of thing. And it's not bad writing. It's not like they read the script and they know everything so they can take these risks, and it's inconsistent and unfair. And it's not the writer insulting my intelligence and letting the character get away with things that they shouldn't. I feel like this is in the spirit of this high risk taker who is so brave and capable that it's going to keep paying off until occasionally it doesn't, and another Joe is injured, or Duke is injured, or Cobra gets something. I mean, I think it's a little bit like, this is not the same thing, but when Peter Parker is doing well for an issue or 20, sooner or later, something's going to go wrong. His identity is going to be revealed. Someone's going to die. Some important villain's going to have some major victory. And I think there'll be a rhythm where Duke can keep having these small victories because he takes a risk. And then I think the brainwave bomb may go off, or Cobra may get away with the brainwave scanner, or Cobra may get away with the brainwave scanner and another hostage or prisoner, despite Clutch, getting out of there. And so Scotty Cameron says, or worst case scenario, a Joe dies, right? So yes, I'm thinking back to Rock and Roll dying at the end of issue, was it 1?
Yeah, it was still issue 1, wasn't it?
That was not Duke's fault. Duke didn't give a sloppy order. Duke wasn't distracted. That was Rock and Roll being too headstrong. And so this kind of thing may happen again. I thought it was a really fun reveal, particularly with the page turn. And what it means in terms of continuity is that we're talking about page 5, where Duke is laughing, and you get this cool sound effect where the colors of room, the lettering has been this sort of a drop shadow 2 times. So it's blue with pink and purple behind it, and it looks sort of electronic or sort of 80s. Anyway, what this means is that 2 pages earlier, on pages 2 and 3, the half splash across page 2 to page 3, where Mercer's holding Duke down and Destros standing with his arms crossed in front of all these Cobras, Clutch is in that hiss right there.
Huh.
Because I don't think there are any other Cobras in any other hisses in the scene. Now you could say, well, there are other hisses and we don't see the full sort of space of the room. There are probably other Cobras and other hisses. And the reason why I don't think there are is because no other hiss tanks do anything in this scene. No one calls out, Viper 2 and 3, fire back at that hiss. And so Duke didn't know that that's Clutch. I think Duke's sort of crazy risk is not as specific as, hey, my guy's up there in the tank, he's going to save us. It's Clutch is somewhere right now and can do something. Might just turn out the lights, or, press a button and another hatch opens in the floor and some of these Cobras fall into a pit of mechanical snakes.
Yeah, and sort of Greg makes an interesting observation. Is he says, so is Clutch driving the hiss from the gun turret? Because there's this big vroom, which kind of makes you think engine. But given what you were just talking about where the hiss is located in the room, just essentially behind Destro, that it's not necessarily that the hiss is moving. Perhaps it's like a revving or a turning it on, something like that. And so he is definitely in like the gun turret sort of aiming, but I'm
going to no prize this.
My no prize would be as well that it would be useful to have some sort of dual control, that you've got your driver down in the in the main driver's seat, but that you've also got sort of a secondary control in the gunner's position as well, that can sort of do some of the basics, turn on, turn off, move forward, whatever.
And, in the previous issue, we established that Skybound can't keep track of who's in the front of a Cobra vehicle driving it and who's in the back firing its missiles. So, I think Clutch is in the back driving it and firing the lasers. I think also, how do you spell Clutch backwards? I think his twin is in the front and might be turning on the ignition. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about these 2 moments with Destro and ladies who he is involved with or may be involved with.
Yeah, so
on page 5, the same page where Duke is laughing for 3 panels. Once again, Chameleon is reading some Chris Claremont X-Men dialogue between Scott Summers and Jean Grey. Says, maybe I'll have better luck, lover. So Chameleon is threatening the Baroness and refers to her and Destro having some kind of relationship. But a panel earlier, at the bottom of page 4, there's this wordless panel, which comes after sort of the rest of the page where Destro is interacting with the Baroness. So, Mark, how does this strike you?
Yeah, so this is the first time that Baroness and Destro are meeting and are encountering each other. So I guess it's what you might call a meet cute. That isn't a pun. That's just, it's the term for.
No, I don't think it's cute.
It's not cute, but maybe for them, it's what they get off on.
I think it's a meeting. I think it's an encounter.
So they're encountering each other. But this, what is being unspoken, I guess, in that panel on the right with the silent panel with Destro is, this feistiness from the Baroness in the face of these unsurmountable odds of the Joes being held captive and not in a great place, that she's still sort of spitting in the eye essentially, and he's like sort of stepping back and like,
he regards her. Because let's step back in the story, because within this previous page, Destro realizes he may not be able to beat it out of Duke, but maybe he can beat it out of someone else like the Baroness. Mm-hmm. And he says, perhaps this calls for torture. Find her breaking point and see what bleeds out. And she turns. There's a great, I have been told this is called a zip ribbon. So speed lines, right? 2 curved speed lines to show that the Baroness is jerking her head to look to her left. And she says, I'd like to see you try. And I would really like to see Joshua Williamson's script for this panel to see what he's describing, what words he's using for Tom Reilly to draw, because Destro has a particular look and this is a wordless panel. And
Miss Baroness, I find you quite beguiling.
Listeners, that is not dialogue from this issue. That's Mark having a laugh. So, one of our ongoing questions in terms of, when will the Energon universe continuity match up with G.I. Joe continuity that we know from other places? When will the Baroness and Destro be together? When will Snake Eyes show up and fill that ninja-sized hole?
It's quite a small hole because ninjas are very good at escaping through very small gaps. So a ninja-sized hole could be quite small.
I think Storm Shadow in another continuity once escaped out of a jail cell with no seams and a locked door. And that's just Larry Hama waving his hand. So, I look at this scene and I think, okay, this is planting a seed for an issue, 10, 20 down the road, where maybe Destro and the Baroness will have like a moment of being interested in each other, but fate will keep them apart, or Chameleon will still be involved, or maybe they will get together and Baroness will betray the Joes and leave. And, some of the editor and writer responses in the letters pages have alluded to this kind of sort of story pacing and doling out. But one of the letter writers in this issue 5, says, how do you decide when to introduce a character? Also, do you have it all laid out the way, or are some laid out and some just coming based on how the story's going? That's Chad from Canopolis, North Carolina. And that's questions about characters, but that could also easily be about story beats. And the answer from writer Joshua Williamson is, we have a pretty massive plan for the Energon universe and the future stories of G.I. Joe. Lots of big plans and arcs. I do pivot from time to time depending on the story and if fun ideas come to me while I'm working on an issue, but I still stick to an overall guide for where we are going. That also helps us figure out what characters to introduce and when. We really look at what makes the most sense for the story. We don't want these character introductions to ever feel random or wasteful. And he writes a little bit more in that response. And, I'm aware that, we're reading like the fifth, the sixth, G.I. Joe continuity there have been shows, there have been movies, there have been movies that redo the movies, there have been comics and new comics. And, there are even some pocket continuities that are like one sole graphic novel or one sole miniseries. I will never get tired of variations on the Destro Baroness dynamic. And so I want two things. I want to be surprised. I want something fresh and new. But I also want, even if it's things I've seen before, Destro and the Baroness getting along, I want it to be compelling. And this is compelling. This is both things. This is something new and it's compelling. And in this Joshua Williamson energon universe, plotting kind of pace, it's both fast and it's slow. It's taken this long for them to meet, but so much is said in that one panel. Maybe. And then I'm reminded, the next page, the first panel, oh, right, Chameleon's still there. So should we talk about Ripper?
Yeah. AKA Cringer from He-Man.
You're saying,
what did we think about this?
I thought it was great, actually. I thought we should tell folks what's going on. So on page 7, after this surprise reveal of Clutch in the driver's seat, in the turret of the Hiss, firing and immediately taking out some Cobras and injuring Mercer. This is page 7, panel 4. Ripper jumps down on the ground and clasps his hands over his head with his knees and his elbows on the ground. And he's in the foreground and he's sort of knocked out in one color and he yells, "Not again!" And I didn't take that as funny. I thought, oh, the Dreadnoks were thoroughly trashed in the Cobra Commander miniseries, mind games and also physically. And I thought, oh, Ripper's having PTSD, which is not something that G.I. Joe comics have touched on very often. And so, yes, in broad strokes, you can take this as, he's a fraidy cat and it's played for laughs. Because the violence of the previous 3 panels is visceral. And so I thought, yeah, some Cobras in this scene can be brave. Mercer's brave for getting in the way of Destro and taking a hit for him, right? And Destro's brave or stupid for just standing there and demanding that they return fire. And Ripper's just overwhelmed. And I thought, is there some seed being planted here of him not wanting to be with Cobra? Because Cobra Commander's crazy and the levels are too high and the stakes are too high. And he will leave Cobra and go back to the Bayou. And this panel is sort of part of that story.
Yeah, isn't necessarily where you'd immediately expect the story to go, and also pointing that characters don't have to be just one thing, because obviously he was portrayed one way, sort of attacking the Joes, just the issue previously, and sort of a little bit gleeful in that, but then sort of when there's lasers shooting all around him, that he can certainly behave in another way completely again. Should we talk about another first, Cobra Commander versus Duke appearing together for the first time in this issue?
Yeah, we can go out of order. What a last page. There's a lot going on here. So Cobra Commander has just done something terrible. He's kicked Dr. Monev into the brainwave scanner to possibly be vegetated by it. And he's going to continue with his plan to, vaporize a 5-mile radius mentally in DC. And then he's stopped, right? Oh, and Cobra Commander is doubly cold and vicious, because not only has he just heartlessly betrayed Dr. Monev, and a page earlier, Dr. Monev is sort of excited. Oh, I can't believe these crazy evil terrorists. You're letting me be an evil, crazy genius with my evil, crazy machine? I didn't think I'd be able to go this far, this fast, right? Kick. And then Destro reports his failure, that the Joes have gotten away. And then Cobra Commander has this 3-word balloon progression. Fine, I will handle the transport myself. We will continue this conversation at headquarters, right? Like, oh no, I'm a little worried about Destro now, that Cobra Commander is going to yell or punish him or push a button, and Destro in the next issue will fall into a trap door with some robot snakes. And you get this page turn where Duke has snuck up on Cobra Commander, which is, again, so much is going on here. Duke is crazy because the Joes just escaped. And then is it the Baroness who says, wait, where's Duke? Right? Yes, she says, where's Duke? And Duke stayed behind because he's maybe headstrong. Crazy is not the right word. Headstrong. And which is not the code name of any G.I. Joe characters, but is the name of a Decepticon Predacon. I don't mean Beast Wars Predacon. I mean Decepticon Predacon. But the sort of cool moments where Duke gets to say something, you know, like I'm stopping you in your tracks, or that's enough of that, or your mind bomb game is over, right? Or assimilate this, right? Or Avengers Assemble, whatever it is. Williamson slightly turns it on his head because I'm expecting Duke to say the cool thing. And Williamson is remembering who knows who and who knows what. And Duke doesn't know who Cobra Commander is. And so the issue ends with this really satisfying page turn that is, it's a twist, right? Because Duke asks a question. Who the hell are you? Right. And it's still a threat because he has a pistol at Cobra Commander's head. Although I bet the first page of next issue has Cobra Commander like pushing a button on his wrist, and like a trapdoor near Duke opens up and Duke is going to fall into some robot snakes. Or, you know, Cobra Commander's going to like push a button and the lasers, or Cobra Commander's going to pull out his sword, or like.
Yeah, he has that sword on his hilt. Let's not forget.
Remind me, what weapon is Duke holding in his other hand?
I'm taking this to be a energized like baton,
like a billy club.
Yeah, like a sort of extendable kind of billy club type thing. So I'm assuming that the Viper's probably. I'm guessing. I've not tracked it down, but I'm guessing that there's probably a panel somewhere earlier on in the story where a Viper might be holding something like that.
Right. So this page, Tom Reilly draws no background. I don't know if he inks the shadows or if Jordie Bellaire did that herself, but this reminds me a little bit of I was talking about the final page of the last issue in a previous episode where Reilly took a shortcut, but I don't think of it as bad or lazy. I just think of it as smart. That if, you know, assuming that Reilly's drawing in order page 1 through 20, when he gets to page 20, he might be tired, he might be out of time. And what is a shortcut he might take on a final page? Or Williamson might say, like, no background, this moment is just about these two characters, right? And then Jordie Bellaire is like, I'm going to do something really bold here. Orange, right? Orange and its opposite, blue, right? And the orange and the blue are, you know, sort of picking up in Cobra Commander's blue and red, which here is sort of an orange anyway.
Greg points out that Dr. Mindbender came with a sort of a electric prod or wand, like a bit like a cattle prod or something. I don't know exactly if it probably said on the packet kind of some hint of what it might be, but it was kind of this prod, and it had a wire coming out of it and into like a
slide projector,
electric box. I don't think it was a slide projector,
but it's not a square. It's like a shoebox ratio. It's rectangular.
Yeah,
I always thought that Mindbender used that to clean Serpentor's teeth because he needed an oversized, like, novelty prop sized one. I think this is a very cool last page, and I've got a segue to my next topic. So before I do that, Mark, do you want to say anything about this last page or the scene?
Well, I think it's a great last page for the book, and it sort of really lines up for a great confrontation for the final issue of this arc. But the book is very much a kind of two halves. It's the sort of the scrappy Joes making their escape at the front, and then this Cobra Commander Monev bit at the end, and this, because essentially the bigger story is that Cobra Commander is in the center, in the heart of Washington, D.C. I think important things happen there. And he's about to, launch this bomb, which is potentially going to brainwash everyone in a 5-mile radius. And there's this sort of trifling distraction happening on a floor below or something with those G.I. Joes and those other goons that Cobra Commander is quite happy having as a distraction. So the real story, the real threat here is actually Cobra Commander, and by Duke staying behind, he's sort of able to confront that. And yeah, what it made me think was that in this Skybound universe, in this G.I. Joe, you've got these scrappy Joes, and things don't necessarily always go their way. In fact, of the confrontations, they seem to lose more than they win, or at least suffer with their win. And the normal trope is that you've got like a bomb, you've got a ticking timer. The goodies are going to win, and they're going to prevail at the last second. What I started thinking about was, maybe the Joes aren't going to win. Maybe this brainwave bomb is actually going to go off, and maybe even the Joes could all become brainwashed for Cobra. And sort of thinking ahead to issue 7, where we know there's a bit of change of scene. It's going to focus on this other Joe team with Beachhead. Maybe part of the reason for doing that is because all of these Joes are going to lose, and they're going to become brainwashed, potentially with the. And so let's make this extra subversive. We're all expecting Baroness to defect to Cobra at some point, and wouldn't the brainwave bomb be a good device for brainwashing her to Cobra and making her come over? What if she's the only one that escapes the bomb? What if they all become Cobras apart from Baroness? There we go. That was a long train of thought.
No, that's all great. And I think I had a 25% formed version of that in the back of my head. Like, oh, what if the Joes all get hit by this bomb? And what about Beachhead? Somewhat related. I wonder if the next arc of G.I. Joe with Beachhead and I think Flint and Lady J, as set up by the Free Comic Book Day special last year, the Energon Universe special last year, I wonder if that might jump back in time and have them on some mission that we haven't seen, looking into something else. I don't think the Scarlet Ninja stuff, maybe some Transformer stuff, but I really don't want this bomb to go off because its damage will be so great. But what a high stakes and what a storytelling device that Williamson has provided for himself, even if sort of a smaller version of the bomb goes off. We're used to, in the Real American Hero continuity from Larry Hama, the brainwave scanner hurts 1 or 2 people at a time, or in the case of Millville, voluntarily a small town. But that took days and weeks. People sort of lined up to go into the trailer and out. And I can't remember if there was more than one trailer. But I imagine that next issue, a good third of it is going to be a really dramatic fight between Cobra Commander and Duke. And I imagine next issue I will be saying when we record, oh yeah, this is really bookending from the beginning of the Duke and Cobra Commander miniseries, which I think they're alluding to right here in the letters page, or I'm extrapolating from something in the letters page. And then the other thing that this page and what you were just saying makes me think is that this arc so far has done a good job of balancing that it's a team, but that maybe an ensemble story can be less satisfying than one of those team members being a little more primary. This isn't a solo book. It's not Duke. It's not G.I. Joe featuring Duke. It's G.I. Joe. But Duke does get to do the most. And like a comparison might be, the live action X-Men movies. The very first live action X-Men movie, it's called X-Men, but Wolverine's the main character. And, who's the secondary character? I guess Rogue. And then, Xavier and then Magneto. And it's like, wait, what about the X-Men? What about Cyclops and Storm? And because, Hugh Jackman is a great performer and everyone loves him and all the comics fans love Wolverine, and like maybe Cyclops is boring. I don't think that's fair, but maybe you then have this whole franchise that's these X-Men movies, but it's kind of the Wolverine show. And this is a different sort of mixture. This is a different percentage. I feel like this balance is still quite fair, where it's still a G.I. Joe story, but Duke is front and center. And some of that feels really satisfying because Tom Reilly is drawing this arc and drew the Duke arc.
Mm-hmm.
And I might not feel quite the same way if any other artist, very, very talented artist, were drawing this arc, because just visually, this just looks like the Duke miniseries. And the mystery that he was investigating, it's coming to a head here with all the other stuff from all the other comics.
But though he's still no closer to finding Starscream, to be fair.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Well, that's gonna right. Well, that might be the first crossover event or something, in October. I think Skybound had a phone call for retailers around this week where they were gonna hype up store owners on, upcoming issues of these 3 comics. And so, maybe a crossover is coming. My segue here is that Duke is holding a pistol in this particular weapon, which we're wondering about. And if we go back to pages 12 and 13, Shane says, hasn't Mercer used that baton? While I talk about pages 12 and 13,
Probably.
Mark, maybe you can grab all your Duke and G.I. Joe issues and flip through them and look for a baton. What happens besides all this cool small panel moment to moment fighting, close quarters fighting, kicking, punching, stabbing, and sound effects and sort of color knockouts and white zip baton on the page 12 and 13 spread is what happens in each trio of panels is a Joe hits a Cobra and takes a weapon. So you don't literally see it in each trio of panels, but by the end of it, like this panel we're looking at right now, Baroness has 2 knives, Duke has a pistol, and notably, Stalker has a shotgun.
I said earlier that Duke wasn't any closer to getting Starscream, but we do find him at the very end of this issue with Cobra Commander, and Scotty Cameron does point out that Cobra Commander does sound very similar to Starscream. So
what's the code name of Duke's friend? Who the other guy in the jet?
What was it? Snowy, milky, something like that.
I think it was 2 panel. I think it was 2 syllables. It was like hightail or like snowball or ice skate.
Yep.
Speed
frosting. Yeah.
Frosty. Thanks, Shane.
Something like that. Frosting. Yeah. I think his surname was Frosting.
Hey, look at the little spikes on the Braveways scanner's head panel. Those aren't little attachment nodes. I think when you get the brainwave scanner, I think 4 little needles stick into your cheekbone. I'm looking at page.
Oh, right.
18.
The close up of
Dr. Monev as the sort of faceplate comes down, and he says, "Please know it could kill me." Cobra Commander is really mean. Really, really.
This is a good summary of the story. Cobra Commander is really mean.
Oh, Dr. Monev is tearing up here. He's really panicking.
Oh wow, yeah.
I didn't see that because I'm sort of paying attention to all the other highlights on the panel.
Did you pick up the sort of the reflection? It's like maybe 2 panels on, just on the page turn of Monev in Cobra Commander's mask.
Yeah. This is the like, top panel of page 19.
A bit like this. It's not the Scream. There's
Edward Munch's painting.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of another one of that kind of guy in the chair, sort of wearing a kind of red robe or something, and he's like, famous painting. Looks like that guy.
Okay.
I found the thing that I was trying to find. So it is study after Velázquez's portrait of Pope Innocent X by Knowledge is Power. France is Bacon. This picture was what I was trying to remember.
Okay. Do you know the year of this painting?
He made a series of paintings based on this theme through the 1950s and 60s. So this particular one, I think, is 1950.
Well, it would be fun.
So that was what I was seeing in
Cobra Commander's
mask.
It would be fun to know
Screaming Man.
what Reilly was thinking when he drew this, or what, if anything, Williamson prompted in his script.
But the whole interaction with Cobra Commander and Monev is also reminding us that Cobra Commander in this universe particularly is, particularly dastardly, and I think dastardly is not a strong enough word, but also
vicious.
Vicious, yeah, cold-blooded, and also very capable. That he's not necessarily, this is one-on-one. This isn't him just letting an underling deal with Monev here. He is a scientist, and he knows stuff, and it is him that is sort of developing the brainwave bomb himself as well. That he's using Monev's technology and adapting it to a more diabolical device.
In the letters page, letter writer Sean Taylor says, "You guys said you never dug the 80s Cobra Commander, the 80s cartoon Cobra Commander, and are putting in overtime to make sure yours is intimidating." I feel like you actually do have the cartoon version, but you've sort of amped them up. And Williamson, in response, says, "Did I ever say I didn't like the 80s Cobra Commander? I don't know if I did. That might be some misquote from an interview. I was annoyed by certain aspects of the cartoon, but never disliked Cobra Commander. I love Cobra Commander. One of my favorite characters. We just wanted to make him scarier." And this, thinking back to, it was issue 1 of Cobra Commander, where a Cobra Law citizen on the bottom right of a page yells "retreat," and we all think, oh, that's Cobra Commander, because we know the visuals from G.I. Joe the movie. We know what Cobra Commander looks like without his costume, and he always yelled "retreat." And then you turn the page, and that guy gets vaporized, and Cobra Commander says "attack." And I think 2 or 3 letters in future issues pointed out that switcheroo, that surprise. And you and I talked about it. And I feel like in every instance where Williamson can write the Cobra Commander who we know, who backs down or fails, this Cobra Commander has stepped up and succeeded. And since many of these are mean and deadly actions, strapping Dr. Monev into the brainwave scanner, he's coming across as all the things we just said. And Destro, gosh, it's Destro who's less successful. I sort of wonder why Destro didn't use his wrist rockets in this issue, because he's pointing.
Is he shown with them?
Yeah, the page after Clutch is revealed in the Hiss tank, and then Clutch starts firing, and then Destro yells, "Return fire, you fools!" And in the background, 3 or 4 Vipers are getting vaporized, and in the foreground, Chameleon with a pistol is starting to fire back, and Mercer is sort of panicking, and Destro he's not pointing with his index finger out. He's got his fist forward, as if he's not pointing because he might fire his missiles. Also, I think there's a coloring mistake on this panel, because aren't his missiles red? Here, one whole gauntlet is silver, but then his other one's red. Anyway, I'll allow it. Jordie Bellaire, if this is a mistake, can make one tiny mistake in a whole issue that's almost accurate anyway, because silver, red, close enough. Scrap Iron gets to use a big cannon, big rocket launcher.
He does, doesn't he? Yeah.
And it's not an energon weapon, because it's incendiary, right? Like flame comes out of the back, and to the left of the flume sound effect, there is a missile or rocket shape. So I will return to a familiar refrain. Mark, is this accessory something that we've seen in some classified toys?
It's a good question, and it's one that I wondered to myself as well. That I was like, is this a thing? And I think this isn't. I think both the weapon and the look of Scrap Iron here is an invention of Tom Reilly, probably taking some inspiration. But if you remember, when we've seen Scrap Iron before, he has used the classified design for scrap iron, very much like the original, an updated interpretation of the original version 1. But what he's doing here is he's sort of making it a kind of a bit more of a bulky, armored version of that costume, and it is not identical to the toy or the original version 1. And I did have a look at scrap irons of the past to see where if there was an equivalent. What I found was this version here, which is that from that sort of early 2000s sort of Venom versus Valor type era, which has kind of got some of that bulkiness to the outfit, but yeah, definitely not the same version there.
And no rocket launcher like that.
No rocket launcher like that. Rachel points out that a comic pack scrap iron came with a Heat Viper rocket launcher, so not a million miles away, but there we go.
We can also allow for Joshua Williamson to just have any character in G.I. Joe pick up any weapon, and it may not be a weapon that they have used previously in toy form, and that's okay. Because as we remember from early action figure dossiers, many Joes and Cobras are experts at many weapons. I think I'm out of things to say.
Greg has an I Spy. There are 2 Francis Bacons. There's one who is an English philosopher from the 1600s, and there is also a painter who was in the late 1900s, I guess you'd call it.
This is a reference back to that screaming face in...
That's back to the screaming face. One person said knowledge is power, and the other drew screaming faces. What else did I have to say about this issue? My high level point, which I think we've talked about, was just how straightforward an issue it was. It was, it is very much an out and out action, fast paced issue. There's a lot going on, but it felt like a very quick read, and you almost have to kind of slow yourself down and go back and reread it to sort of pick up all of the details. We're looking at some of those pages with those grids of panels, fitting in an awful lot going on each page. So there's a lot there, and Tom Reilly is working very hard, but just the sheer pace of what is going on felt like a quick issue. And I think I've said everything that was in my notes. Yeah.
The final thing I was going to say is that, separate from Tom Reilly telling us this on Instagram, you can look at this issue and compare it to other issues, and he's definitely working hard and harder, because there are no quiet scenes. There's no there aren't 2 pages where Duke and Hawk are talking in an office. And there isn't a 2-page spread where, a Joe can sort of put their hand out and say, hey, look at all these vehicles I found in this hangar, right? And that does present its own challenge, perspective and drawing particular vehicles. But this issue is filled with bodies contorting and punching and kicking. And sure, a lot of panels don't have backgrounds because they're just speed lines. And sure, there are a bunch of close-ups as people, react or yell or panic. But there are many panels with lots of Cobra soldiers in them, running, getting zapped. This is one of those issues that people who draw team books are perhaps wary of. This is not an issue of Duke. Where, like, if Duke was doing all this, if this was an issue of the Duke miniseries, this would be on a slightly smaller scale, because it wouldn't be Cobra Commander and Destro and Scrap Iron and Mercer. It would be 2 of those guys. And Dr. Manev wouldn't be here yet, right? And some of these Joes would be here, but maybe not all of them. And there would not be 2 pages in a row with 20% more panels. And, drawing a 2-page spread of Times Square takes a long time, but in a different way, drawing a 2-page spread with 23 panels takes a long time. And because part of it is the mental energy of not repeating yourself, that on this visual, this kick and this punch and this lunge and this grab is different from the other one. And maybe Williamson called out every shot, so-and-so stabs, so-and-so punches, so-and-so lunges. Maybe he didn't. Maybe Reilly added to it, made it harder for himself. And there are no panels or pages here where I feel like, oh, Reilly's not working as hard or he's phoning it in. And I do include that final page. I feel like that final page with no background is a reasonable break and not a shortcut, a smart shortcut, and certainly not lazy.
I think it makes it more impactful, to be honest, as well. It's sort of really quite that page turn, quite the beat. We've got an interesting thing here. We've got a live watchers error detected nomination. Let's see what they have to say.
Error detected. Error detected. No prize incoming.
So this is a new one. So Rachel has said, "Is CoverGirl miscoloured on the Yo Joe page?" Now, Rachel, maybe you can elaborate where you think the miscolouring is occurring. I'm looking at this page and I'm looking at the Yo Joe specific panel. So CoverGirl is basically blonde, wearing a black top. We've got a face. I think that the face here isn't suggesting a different ethnicity necessarily, but more her being perhaps a little bit more in the shadow. So it's a darker skin tone, closer to maybe Risk, and but also Clutch in the background is a similar skin tone, but
top left corner above Risk.
Yeah, as in top left corner of this image, I think. If
it's her complexion being darker than Caucasian, I'm going to chalk that up to she's in the foreground, and that separates her a little bit from the sort of background color. Mm-hmm. And I do think that her complexion on that first panel, if you're looking at the episode right now, if you're watching this, her complexion does match Clutch. Mm-hmm. So I don't think I don't
There's
think
some highlights on her like nose and on her sort of like forehead, and further down in that panel as well. You've kind of,
the only coloring mistake I see here is that in that first panel, she has a white cuff on her jacket. And now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, panel 6, we don't see that white cuff on her left arm. So maybe that little wrinkle past her Caucasian forearm should actually have left white.
Yeah, I think from that panel, the sort of the highlight on her face is sort of seems to suggest to me that that's a colouring choice rather than a colouring mistake. So, Tim, are we done with this issue? Are we wrapping up?
We're done. This issue was great, but you make a good point about needing to slow down because there's perhaps less dialogue and more punching and kicking and stabbing.
So this first arc will conclude with G.I. Joe issue 6, released on April the 16th. An exciting looking cover promising Duke versus Cobra Commander. We will talk about that cover in more detail next time. So, Tim, tell us, where can people find you when you are not talking to me about all things G.I. Joe?
My partners and I have a YouTube channel with video essays on TV and film. Our next one is on Growing Pains, the 80s sitcom. And that is at Atomic Abe on YouTube. I have a comic book store, a physical brick and mortar comic book store that's mostly graphic novels, but G.I. Joe back issues, if you're missing some, in Somerville, Massachusetts. That's Hub Comics. And I have a blog where I write about G.I. Joe. That's arealamericanbook.com.
And it has come up a couple of times recently, people coming back to ARA after a time away, wanting to catch up on the IDW issues. Those IDW ARA issues had a lower print run. They are harder to find than the Skybound issues. And so people are on the hunt for them. Tim, can you help people with that hunt?
Yes, we don't have every issue, 155.5 through 300, but we have about 2/3 of them. And while we don't normally do mail order,
Is it the bottom 2/3 or the?
someone?
No, it's not that. Sorry, it's not that you cut them in.
It's actually the back. It's the front.
Right.
We have
Okay.
The first 8. We have pages 1 through 16.
I see.
We don't have pages 17 through 28. We don't do mail order, but I make exceptions for Talking Joe fans. So send me a message if you have missing issues, or email the store.
Very good. And you can find Talking Joe at talkingjoe.co.uk. That is the website where you can be pointed to all of the places we can be found. So our Facebook group, join in the discussion there, see the latest news. We're also on Twitter, aka X, Instagram, and you can find the links to all of the podcasts and the YouTube videos, etc. We've also got a link to our Patreon site, which is patreon.com/talkingjoe. So a big thanks to all of our backers: Richard, Sam, Bill, Christopher, Justin, Rob, Shane, Simon, Chris, Joe, Craig, Frank, Mike, D, Shane version 2, who I think comes in a sort of a tan camo, and Infinite Entertainment. And those guys are getting a warm glow inside from supporting us, but more importantly, they're getting early access and some exclusive content. So, find Talking Joe. We will be covering lots in these coming weeks because Skybound are going G.I. Joe a go-go. The month ahead is G.I. Joe month, as the silent missions are coming out weekly. So we will be covering them as they come out. We've got some exciting content to come. 6.
There are 6 G.I. Joe. There are 6 new G.I. Joe comics out in April and a reprint. So there are 7 different G.I. Joe comics. I'm not talking about variant covers.
No, there's 15 retailer variant covers for just the reprint of issue 21, Tim.
That's a lot.
We have revealed 7 of those so far on the Talking Joe Facebook group. But so it's going to be a busy month ahead as we sort of work our way through those issues as they come out, and we've already got some great interviews with some of the creators lined up as well. I think we've probably got like 5 or 6 sort of creator interviews in the pipeline.
Don't jinx it. Someone might cancel.
So it's exciting times ahead. So I think we are pretty much done now. I was just looking at the comments there. I think there's most of the issue 21 variant covers will be just of the Baroness.
Sexy Baroness.
So sexy.
Who does so much in that issue.
So I think, Tim, that we are done. But before we go, please, what do we need to remember?
Nobody Beats Talking Joe, an international podcast.
There we go. Laters.